Today we will learn how to update your remote control firmware. To update your remote control firmware, you need two parts. First part is the firmware file itself. This is the actual program that your remote control uses to perform its tasks. The firmware file has a bin extension. Firmware files are usually distributed inside a zip archive to reduce download size and protect file content from corruption when downloaded. The second part is a software application that runs on your computer. This application is called Firmware Update application. It connects to your remote control and updates it using the bin firmware file we discussed before. The firmware file is universal and does not depend on your operating system. The firmware update application is different between Windows and Mac computers. You will need to download the firmware update application that suits your computer. This video will guide you through the download, installation, and use of the firmware update application. So let's get started. To begin, we will have to download both firmware file and the updater application as we discussed before. We will log into the Promote Systems website at www.promotesystems.com, then click on Support. Click Downloads, click Promote Control, and finally choose Firmware Updates. In this area, we will have both firmware files and updater applications for both Mac and Windows operating systems. Let's start with downloading the firmware update file. The easiest to open the file is to open it with Windows Explorer in Windows, and we will show how to open it in Mac operating system in a moment. Here is the bin file we discussed before. We can drag it to our desktop for further use. We don't need our zip file anymore, so we can close that. Click back. And now download the firmware update application for Windows, which is our current operating system. If you would be running Mac, you would download this file instead. Just like with the firmware file, we can open it with Windows Explorer. It's also a zip file. Except we don't need to drag it to our desktop, we can simply run it from here. The installation wizard starts, and we simply follow the prompt to install the required software. This prompt will tell you that the installer needs drivers to update your remote control firmware. When prompted to install the drivers, please do confirm the installation. In this case, the drivers were already installed, and if you see a window that requests whether to install the drivers or not, please click Install. In this case, we will simply click Finish and launch the Remote Control Firmware Update application. With the Mac operating system, it's just as easy as with Windows. We also start with www.promotesystems.com and click on Support, and click Downloads, click Remote Control, and then finally Firmware Updates. We start with downloading the firmware file of our choice, and at this time the version 2.20 is the latest. Click Download button and open the file. For simplicity, we can simply pick the bin file that has been opened from the zip we just downloaded and put the bin file on our desktop. This bin file is the firmware file we will now flash into our remote control device. The next step is to go back and and then download the firmware update application for the Mac operating system. We see that file in our downloads as completed. We open the file, and we see a DMG, which is the installation archive. Click on that, we have a firmware update archive opened with a promote application, which we can copy over to our applications. Or start directly from here. Confirm the opening, and the firmware update application is started. The further steps on Mac operating system will be the same to ones on Windows, which we will show further. Now we are ready to update Promote Control firmware. First, let's click Browse, choose Desktop, and then choose the firmware file we have just downloaded. Note that the firmware file has the bin extension. And now we need to connect our Promote Control to the computer. Connect the included white firmware update cable to your Promote Control unit first. And then, holding Mode button down, connect the white firmware update cable to your computer. For best results, only connect your Promote Control directly to your computer. Do not connect it to USB hubs or any kind of extension cables. If this is the first time you connected your Promote Control unit to your Windows computer, a driver installation notice may be shown. Please confirm any installation requests if prompted, and wait until drivers are installed before proceeding. With Mac computers, driver installation is not required, and you may proceed to the next step right after your Promote Control is connected. The final step is to click Update button. The actual update process takes only a few seconds. While the Promote Control update is underway, please do not disconnect it from the computer, do not power down your computer, and do not close Firmware Update application. Doing so may render Promote Control unresponsive and may require following recovery procedures outlined in your Promote Control user manual. After the firmware update is finished, click OK to the confirmation prompt and disconnect your Promote Control from your computer. Your Promote Control is now ready for use with its updated firmware.